Hi friends, welcome to my channel. This is the second video on the Create RE Framework from Scratch series. In the first video, I created the overall structure of the RE framework where my focus was on the four states: initialization, get transaction data, process transaction, and the end process, and their transitions, how from one state to another state it goes, and what are the conditions for that. So from initialization state, there could be two possibilities: that everything was successful in the initialization state, or else it encountered any system exception. So in the initialization state there will be no business exception, because business exception only we can get in the process transaction state. So in the initialization state, let me go to these transitions. Okay, so the source is initialization and the destination could be two. One is get transaction data and another one is end process. So if system exception is nothing, then it will go to the get transaction data, and if system exception is not nothing, then it will go to the end process. Okay, you're clear on this one, that from initialization bot can go to two states. For system exception it will go here, and for everything is successful, the bot will go to the get transaction data state. Now let's say that everything was successful in the initialization state and bot came to this get transaction data. Now in the get transaction data there could be two possibilities. One is bot has got some data, so if there is a new transaction, then bot will go to the process transaction item to process that particular data. Another case it could be that bot has not found any new data. So in that case, bot has completed all the data. So in that case, it will go to the end process. So from get transaction, there could be two possibilities: no data or new transaction data. So let's assume bot got some new transaction data, then it will come to the process state. So in the process state, while processing, there could be three possibilities. One is everything was successful. Bot has successfully completed the transaction. In that case, bot will go to the get transaction data. So to get the new next transaction. Okay. Another case could be bot has got some business exception. So if bot encounter any business exception while processing any new transaction, in that case, as it is a business exception, so bot will mark that as a business exception and it will go to the get transaction to get the next transaction item. Another case, it could be that bot has encountered system transaction in this particular state. So if bot found some system transaction, so system transaction means there could be some application related or those kind of exceptions. So in those cases, the best uh, solution is not to go for the next transaction, but first close the particular applications where bot is getting the system exception and go to the, so for system exception bot will close the applications here, all the applications, and again go to the initialization state to again open all the applications, and then it will start fresh. So in real life scenario, that's what we do, right? When any application is not responding properly or something happened with the application, we first close the application and then we try to work for the next things. So this is what bot also do. So if bot found any system exception, then it will close all the applications and then it will mark that as system exception and it will go to the initialization state. Okay, so let me open anyone. So let's say it is system exception is nothing and business exception is nothing. Then it will go to the get transaction data. So this is success. Okay. Now business exception. Here If business exception is not nothing, means there is something in the business exception, then it will go to the get transaction data. Now let's say if found any system exception in the process state, means system exception is not nothing. So in that case, it will go to the process initialization state again. Okay. So this was the overall uh, things that I discussed on the previous video. So in this video, I will go deep dive in the initialization state, and all the things you are seeing here, I will create this initialization state from the scratch, from the beginning. Okay. So at the end of this series, we will have a RE framework similar to this, exactly similar to this, but we created it on our own. So let's start this. So let us go to the our XAML. Okay, this is the process we started, and we have created these things. Okay, so first there is one mistake I have done in the previous video. Let's correct that first. So in the initialization state, there could not be any business exception. Okay, so in this I have written business exception is nothing, and also system exception is nothing. So here only I will remove this business exception is not nothing, because in the initialization state there will now business exception, only system exception could be possible in the initialization state, because business exception can only get in the process state. Okay, and I will modify this log also. There is no system exception. Okay, let me save it. Another mistake I have done is this system exception variable will be of is system exception, but it will be of type exception, because system exception is the parent of all exceptions. So it will be system dot exception. This one will be the variable type. So see, previously it was written as system exception, but now it is showing as only exception. Okay, so these were the two modifications that I have done from the previous video. Okay, one is in the from the initialization state to a success state, there is only system. If there is no system exception, then only that is a success, because in initialization state we can only get the system exception. Let me see here also. Here it is correct that system exception is not nothing, means it will go to the end state. Okay, now let me go to the initialization state. So let me give a annotation here. So annotation is very important to see the overall that what we have done in the initialization state. So what we do in the initialization state, we will read the config file. We'll read the config file, but we will not read the config file every time. I will write something here, read the config file for the first run, or better to write file only for the first run. I will explain it that why I have written that only for the first run, and also we will initialize the applications that we will use in the process state. Initialize applications. We will initialize the applications here. Okay, let me just let it be. So let's go inside the initialization state. So in the initialization state, whatever we will do inside a try catch block. Okay, so let me take a try catch block here. because in the try block, if bot face any system exception, then it will come to this exception. Okay, and we will assign here our system exception variable that we have taken as this exception. Okay, so you see, in the initialization state we will do everything in the try block. Okay, and inside the try block, if bot encounter any exception, then where it will come to this exception catch section. And in the catch section, what we have done, we have assigned the system exception as exception. Okay, so now here in the transition, you see the system exception will be not nothing. So in that case, bot will go where? In the end state. Okay, so you understood that? Let me just rearrange it so that it looks better. Okay, okay, now I think it's good. Okay, so let's go to the try block then. Now in the try block, what we will do, let's give a log message first that the initialization started. Give a log message. I think initialization started. Log messages are very important to debug the code for the when we can get lot of things in the from the output panel to see the log messages. So in that case, log message is very important. Okay, so first we will assign the system exception is nothing. System exception is nothing, because in the initialization, when we starting the initialization, then system exception should be nothing. After that, if we get any system exception, then only it will go to the end state. Okay, so for that it is very important to uh, confirm that system exception was nothing when we started the process, when we started the initialization. Okay, so system exception is nothing. Now here I will implement the reading the config file for the first time thing. Okay, so let me give a annotation here, reading the config file only for the first time. So let's understand it. Okay, why we have implementing this. So do you know that when bot will come to the initialization state? Okay, so the first case is when we will trigger the bot for the first time. In start, it will come from the initialization. Okay, so that is one scenario, but there is another scenario that bot can come to this initialization state. That is in the process transaction state. If bot found any system exception, in that case also bot will come to the initialization state. But in that scenario, there is no need to read the config file again, because when bot ran for the first time, it already read the config file and there was no exception. That's why only bot came to this process state through this get transaction. So in that case, I should not read the config file again. So I think you understood now. So what will be the condition I should give here? I can give here that config is nothing. So when bot will run for the first time, in that case, config will be nothing. When it will come from the process state, then there will be data in the config file. So in that case, bot will not read the config file again. Okay. Now I think you understood it. Okay. So now, so I'll read the config file in a new XAML. Okay. So if you read the config file inside here, it will be messy. Okay. So I will read a config file in a new XAML and then I'll invoke that XAML here. Okay. So let me take a new XAML. Okay, I'll take a sequence and I'll give this name of the sequence as init state. Or let me check that in the actual RE framework what they are using, then I can use the exactly that thing. Init all settings. I will give the name as init all settings. Init all settings. Okay. So in the init all settings, what I'll do, I'll read the config file. Okay. So here I will need some arguments. So first argument that I will need is out argument. So in this out argument, the bot will read the config file and that config file should be available outside of this XAML so that I can use this config on the other XAMLs also. So that for that reason I will use a out config. I will give the direction as out. Now what is the type of this? So the config is type of dictionary of string and object. Dictionary, where it will be there, corelib, private dot corelib, collection generic, this one. Okay, string and object. Okay, that is one. Another thing that I will need is the path of the config file. So where that config file is there, so that will be a in config path. Okay, so that will be of string type. Another thing I will need is seeds, in config seeds. Okay, so these are the three arguments we will need. Okay, another thing that we will need a config file. Okay, so we will take the config file from the RE framework. So this is the config file that when you will create a RE framework, this config file will be inside that RE framework. So I will use it here. Okay, so I already have it. Okay, so this I have taken from the RE framework. Let me open it. Okay, so this is the config file, standard config file from the RE framework. Okay, so these are the three sheets: settings, constants, assets. Okay, but we will read first the settings and constants. Okay, and we will read this asset sheet in a separate. Okay, because for the asset we have to connect with the orchestrator. Okay, but for the settings and constant, the value we can get from the Excel sheet only. Okay, so let me go to the studio again. Okay, so let me give the path of the config. So what will be the path of the config? Path of the config is that is inside the project file. Okay, so inside the data config, so I will give the path as data config dot xlsx. Okay, so that is the config path. What will be the seats? So I, as I told you, okay, so seats actually I will use as a array of string. Okay, because there are two seats I will use here. Sorry, array of string. Okay, and it will be settings and constants, right? Settings and constants. You have to give the names as it is, otherwise bot will not able to understand. Constants. Okay, and we will take a assign to. So you see the out config we cannot define here. Okay, so we will take a assign activity and we will initialize the out config. So what will be the out config? Out config will be new dictionary. It's a new dictionary of what? Wait. New dictionary of string and object, of string comma object. Okay, so this is the initialization. So we have initialized this out dictionary. Okay, next what we'll do, we will use a for each. So for each seat in the config, in config seats. Okay, and I will use here as current seat. Okay, so in here what we will read, we will read settings and constants, settings and constants. Okay, so for each seat we will use a read workbook activity. Okay, what will be the path? Path will be the in config path, seat name will be current seat. Okay, we will read everything. This is having headers. Okay, we will use the output. So output will be dt settings or constants, settings or constants. Okay, now once the bot reads a particular sheet, then we have to go through each row of that sheet. So let's say bot in the first time bot read the settings sheet. Now we need to go through each row of this particular sheet. Okay, so we have to use a for each row, for each row in a data table. So let me use this one. What will be the data table? Data table will be dt settings or constants. Okay, now so we will take the each row of name and value from this sheet and we'll store that inside our this out config variable. Okay, so how we will do it, we will use, so before store it, we have to use one if condition. Okay, so why we will use this if condition? Because let's say this fourth row is having a blank. Okay, so in that case I should not, there is there is no point to store this blank row, right? So in that case I will first confirm that the row of the name doesn't have any null value. Okay, let me go ahead. I will use not string dot is null or white space. Which string? Current row of name. I have to use a dot to string here, dot to string, and I will use a dot trim. Okay, so I will check the name field. Okay, so if there is something in the name, then I should consider that particular row. Okay, so let me give an name here. If row is not blank, then only I will use it. Okay, so in that case I will take that particular row and put it in the our config, this out config variable. Okay, so how I will store it? So I'll use it as out config of, so key and pair in that the dictionary is there, right? So I'll use it as one minute. So that is current row, of name dot to string. Okay, so the key will be this name. Okay, this name will be the key and it will be the value. Okay, so this is the key and value will be current row of value, and I will use a dot to string here also. Okay, so this is how one by one all the row, the name and the value will be stored in the out config. Okay, first it will come to the settings sheet, it will read this sheet, it will store one by one all the key and pairs. Okay, it will skip this one, then again this one. Okay, similarly for the constants also it will put all the key and value pair in the out config variable. Okay, so once this is done, so now bot has complete reading the settings and constant. Let me give a annotation here also. Read the settings and constants sheet of the config and store it in the out config variable, in the out config. Okay, so now this is done. After that I will read this asset sheet in a next thing. Okay, but I will use it inside a try catch block. Okay, again I will take a try catch block, because here what I was doing, I was reading from the Excel sheet only. So there is a the chance of getting exception here is very low, but here I will have to connect with the orchestrator also, and while connecting with orchestrator there could be anything go wrong. Sometimes what happens, the studio is not able to connect with the orchestrator. In that case there could be any exception. Okay, so because of that I will use a try catch block. Okay, and in the try catch block, first what I will do, I will use the, here I don't need to use for each seat because there is only one seat. Okay, the path will be same, in config path. The seat name will be, I can give the seat name here as a hard coded value. Seat name will be asset or assets. Let me just check assets. Okay, these things we need to very careful. Okay, I will use the data table as dt underscore assets. Okay, let me give a name here, asset sheet. Okay, now once I read the asset sheet, I will use a for each, for each row in data table, for each row in data table. Okay, what is the data table name? Data table is dt assets, and for each row of the asset. Okay, for each row of the asset I need to get the asset value from the orchestrator. So because I am connecting to the orchestrator, again here I will use a try catch block. Okay, I will use a try catch block. Let me give name here, get asset from orchestrator. Okay, and I will use a get asset activity here. Get asset. Okay, what will be the folder? So folder will be given here. Okay, so for each there will be a name. Okay, in the config there will be name in the orchestrator, and there will be orchestrator asset folder. Okay, so what is the folder? Folder path will be current row, of, let me take the name here, this will be the folder path, current row folder path dot to string. Okay, and what will be the asset name? Asset name will be also current row of, what is the name there, asset. Okay, let me give a dot to string here also. Okay, so I will get, the bot will try to get the asset from this orchestrator. Okay, so let me, let's assume bot has got some error while getting the asset from the orchestrator. So in that case what, where what will go, bot will go to come to this catch section. Okay, so let me come here, So let me go system here, and we'll check first. What we'll check, if the just a second, string, first use not, okay, string dot is null or white space current row of asset. So let me just check the name, asset, current row of asset, and dot to string, dot to string. Okay, so if that was not white space or blank, then we will give a throw. Okay, we will use a throw activity. Okay, we will give a new exception. New exception, error while getting asset. Okay, and we will give the asset name here. What is the asset name? Current row of asset dot to string, dot to string. Also we can use a we can give the exception message that bot got. Exception message. Okay, what will the exception message? The message will be exception dot message. Okay, so it will give the exact message that because of what bot got the error. Okay, if asset is not empty, if asset is not empty, in that case bot will give this exception. Okay, so now let's say bot has given this exception. Okay, bot has thrown this error. Now because it has thrown this error, what it will do, it will check that this try catch block, is it parent of another try catch block. Okay, so let's see if it is parent of another try catch block. So it is the parent, this is the parent of this try catch block. Okay, so this try, inside this there was a try catch block, and that has given, that has thrown on exception, so that exception will come to this parent try catch block. Okay, now in this parent try catch block, what we will do, we will rethrow that exception. Okay, here what we will do, we will rethrow that particular exception. Rethrow. Okay, so now when this try catch block will be rethrown, again this try catch block will try to see that is it child of another parent try catch block. Okay, now this init all settings will invoke it here. Okay, let me, will invoke it inside the read config file. Okay, now this, so from this init all settings the exception was rethrown. Okay, so understand it very carefully. So as it is it rethrown, so again it will try to see that is there any parent try catch block. Okay, so you see this is the parent try catch block. Okay, so it will come to the exception of this one. Okay, and you see here the system exception is assigned as the exception that bot has got while getting the asset. So now in the initialization section, bot has got something in the system exception. So as there is system exception, bot will end the process. Okay. Okay, so let me go to here. Give a name here, or let me use a asset. Okay, I hope you understood that. Okay, if bot has not got any exception, then one by one bot will store all the assets in the out config. So I have to that let me so I to store that particular asset in the out config variable, what I need to do, I need to use a assign activity. Use a assign activity. Okay, so in that assign activity, what will be there? Another thing. So there will be asset value. Okay, asset op. Okay, so this is the asset output. Okay, so it in the our out config in key, what will be there? Current row of this name, current row of name, user dot to string. Okay, and in the value, what will be there? In value will be the asset value that we got, the output asset. Okay, so it will be stored one by one in the out config. So this was all about reading the config file. Okay, so I hope you understood this properly. So let me make it once again. Okay, what we have done, we have used one init all set. We have taken on XAML, that is init all settings. Okay, we have first initial, we have taken these three arguments: out config, in config path, in config assets. Okay, and we have you initialize this config path is given as data config.xlsx, because the config is inside the data. Okay, this one. Okay, we have initialized the config seats, so we are reading the seats first. Which two seats? Settings and constants. There are three seats. There is asset also, but we'll read it later on. Okay, we have used a for each seat in the config, and in the for each seat we have used only settings and constants. Okay, we have read the config file, we have gone through each data row. If the row is not empty, then we have stored the uh, key and value pair in the out config argument that we have. Okay, after that we have used a try catch block to read the asset sheet. We are reading the asset sheet here. The data table we got from here, we are using a for each row. For the data table, we are using another try catch block. We are getting the orchestrator asset. We have given the orchestrator folder and orchestrate asset name. Okay, if we are getting in any, we do not have any exception, then it will be stored in the out config. Okay, if we get any exception here, then it will be cached here. So before giving throw the exception, we will just check that if that particular row was having a asset value or not. If it was not having a asset value, it will do nothing, it will go for the next one. Okay, but if it got exception for a asset that was there, then it will throw this exception. So once it throw, it will come to this parent try catch block. Okay, in the parent try catch block it will be rethrown, and this init all settings will be invoked from the initialization state, and the initialization state is also having a try catch block. So it will come to this exception. Here system exception will be assigned to this particular exception, and as the exception system exception is not nothing, it will go to the end state. Okay, I hope you understood this. Okay, so this was all about the init all settings. That means reading the config. Okay, so once we have done all the things, let me input arguments. So the out config that we have read in the init all settings, we have to store it in our that main variable, that is config. So this variable that we have config dictionary of system string and object, we will have the all the all the rows that we stored from the config file, we will have it in the config variable, so we can use it in the throughout the process. Okay, so that is one. Now what is the next thing? Next thing is, in the RE framework, in the argument we will have two arguments here, that is in orchestrator queue name, orchestrator queue name, and in orchestrator queue folder. Orchestrated queue folder. Okay, so if the orchestrator queue name is blank and orchestrator folder name is blank, then there is uh, nothing to do. Okay, bot will read the queue name and orchestrator queue folder name from the config. But if the value will be here given, the default value will be given, then this value will be get prioritized. Okay, so if bot read the config queue name and folder name from here, and the same thing is given here in a different thing, then the the queue name and folder name will be overwritten by these two. Okay, so we go here, and so init all settings is done. So for the override of the orchestrator queue name and orchestrator folder name, will do inside this fast run only. Okay, so let me take a if condition. Let me write here what I have told. Okay, so if orchestrator queue name, if orchestrator queue name in orchestrator queue name is given, then it will override the queue name from the config. Okay, I hope you understood this. Okay, so let me take the condition. Not string dot is null or white space, then or I can use in orchestrator queue name is not nothing, is not nothing, then we'll in the we'll use the assign activity, and in the assign activity we will override this. Okay, config of orchestrator queue name. Okay, so config of orchestrator queue name, config of orchestrator queue name string will be in orchestrator queue name. Okay, zero here. Okay, sorry, so the is not will be in a single thing, is not nothing. Okay, what is the error here? Okay, so there is no need to dot to string because I am overriding it. So already there is some stored value stored in the orchestrator queue name. I am just overriding it, so there is no need to dot to string. Okay, the same thing we will do for the orchestrator queue folder name. Okay, so let me take the if condition here. Let me give the annotation. If, let me take the exact argument name, is specified, then it will override the queue name, the folder name, the queue folder name from the config. Okay, so if an orchestrator queue folder is not nothing, then we'll assign it as config of, let me take the exact orchestrator folder name, config of orchestrator folder name as in orchestrator queue folder. Okay, what is the error here? Oh, sorry, it will be inside a double quote. Okay, so these two overridden are done. Another thing we'll use here, invoke kill all process. Invoke kill all process. So kill all process, just a second. Was kill all process. So that is so kill all process also will take a new sequence. Kill all process. be the kill all process. Okay, let me use a log here. Trace killing processes. Okay, we can use all the processes that will be used in the process state here. Okay, so this all the kill all process also will invoke inside the first run only. Okay, so once this first run is done, then there is another functionality that we'll use. For that we need a variable, that is consecutive system exception. Consecutive system exception. It will be a integer, and it will use it to the throughout the process, the framework. Okay, so let me first take a if activity. Make it big. Let me use the expression first, then I will explain it. Okay, cint of config of consecutive system exception of, it will be given here in the constant consecutive system exceptions. Config of consecutive system exceptions. Consecutive system exceptions, if this is greater than 0, this is greater than 0, and also consecutive system exception, consecutive system exception is greater or equal to cint of config of maximum consecutive system exceptions. Maximum consecutive system exceptions. Maximum consecutive system exceptions. Okay, so let's understand this. Okay, let's go to the x config file. Okay, let's first read it here. The number of consecutive system exceptions allowed. If consecutive system exceptions is reached, the job is stopped. To disable this feature, set this value equal to 0. So let's first understand this. To disable this feature, set the value to 0. So if the value is 0 here, then bot will not consider this particular thing. Okay, this feature will be disabled. So let's understand how this was disabled. Okay, so the first condition here, that this cint of config of maximum consecutive system should be greater than 0. If greater than 0, then only it will check this thing. Okay, because if any one of these false, then it will not go inside the if condition, right? So this should be greater than 0 to enable this particular functionality. Okay, and if there is, so we can set the value as 2 3 4 for use this. Okay, so what does this mean to use this maximum consecutive system exceptions? Okay, so let's say, let me save it here. Okay, let's say bot has got a system exception in the process transaction. Okay, then it goes to again initialization. Okay, it came here, came to this process, again it has got the system exception, again it go here, again it got a system exception, again it goes to the initialization state. So if consecutively one by one bot gets the system exception, then what does that mean? That could be possible that at that particular time the maybe the server that bot is working, that is not available, or the application is not responding at that moment. So there is no point of wasting time. Okay, so we can stop the particular process at that moment and we can run it any some after some time maybe. Okay, because if consecutively 2 3 4 times it is getting faulted and there are 1,000 records that need to be done, then it is not, there is no point to fail for everything. Okay, so bot first will get the system exception here, the if consecutively bot is getting 2 3 exceptions, then according to this maximum consecutive system exception that will be allowed, up to that only bot will try the process. After that bot will stop it. Okay, so here bot what will do, bot will throw. So if this is true, then bot will throw the exception, and bot will throw that new exception. Here we can use the messages maximum consecutive system exception reached. Okay, and also we can use the what was the maximum consecutive exception allowed. So plus config of maximum consecutive exception. Dot to string. Okay, so it will throw this exception. Maximum consecutive exception. Okay, so if maximum consecutive exception reached, then what will do, bot will go to this exception section and it will go to the end state. Okay, the last thing that we'll do here is init all applications. So we'll use a separate XAML for this. Init all applications. So in this init all applications, what we'll do, we'll open all the applications that we will use in the process state. Trace init all application started. Okay, and we'll invoke it at the last. Init all applications. Init all applications. Okay, so this is the complete thing that is there in the initialization state. Okay, so in the next videos I will discuss about the get transaction data. So So actually the initialization state is the uh, complex one, and the process state is also complex one. The get transaction is not very much complex. Okay, so in the next video I will discuss about the get transaction, and in the next to next video I will discuss about the process transaction. Okay, so I hope you understood in this video.